Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth from Elpis Astrology at elpisastrology.com. Thanks for joining me today. So this is going to be my interpretation of the astrology for September 2022. But I want to remind you that you individually take that decision on how you think what I say fits into your life. You always have free will. And remember, this is a general reading. And when I do the reading for the sun signs and ascendants later on in the video, after my introduction, I actually use whole sign houses. It's just an easier way to do it. To have a more accurate reading, you really do need to look at your chart. And I know a lot of my viewers already know a lot about astrology, and they do that already. Okay, so how does September look? Well, it's interesting. We start off the 1st and 2nd of September with a yod. And a yod is kind of like a triangle, and it has two basically planets forming a sextile, but then they jointly form what's called a quincunx, or in conjunction. And when you have this in a natal chart, typically it's not necessarily a burden that you carry, but it's more like not feeling that you really fit in because you've got something in this lifetime that innately you know you have to do. But when we put it into an actual chart, a transiting chart, I tend to read this for more of a mundane aspect, unless you've got something like this exactly hitting some of your points. So what do we have here as part of the yod? So at the two ends, we have Pluto, which is at 26 degrees of Capricorn, and we have Neptune, which is at 24 degrees of Pisces, pointing towards Venus at 26 degrees of Leo. And so we see that these two powerful planets, in many ways transformational, truth-seeking for sure. If we could pick, I suppose, a couple words that could meld both the Pluto and Neptune, it would be truth, seeking truth. And it's pointing at Venus. So then we say, well, what? And it's Venus in Leo. I mean, Venus in Leo is kind of like, who's the star of the show here? It's the natural showman. It also speaks to being idealistic in love. So I really felt that this probably is going to be early September, some kind of event that happens, perhaps to an actual person that comes into public view. This may be a female because it is Venus, but it certainly will speak to our values, value of self, maybe value of females, as well as money. And of course, when we look at money and values, we then say, well, what about love? Now, because we've got Neptune here, aspecting this Venus in a yod, along with Pluto, I think that this probably is going to be leading to an overarching ask from the universe. What do you love? What means something to you? What brings sweetness into your life? But we could see the rise of some female who's not afraid to get on the stage. When we look at the 1st of September itself, we have Mars now in Gemini, and we know, we've heard various times where I talk about the fact that Mars is going to be in Gemini for quite a few months because of a retrograde, right? But on the 1st of September, it does sextile Jupiter, which is still, it's retrograde, but Jupiter is still in Aries. And this is at 6 degrees. So I saw this as, again, right at the beginning of September, positive movement in communicating and feeling very optimistic about it. It's opportunities, I would say, to express some kind of messaging or communication. Now, Gemini does rule the 3rd house, so I'm just going to cover some other things of the 3rd house. The main thing of the 3rd house is communications of any sort, including our thoughts, maybe collecting information. But it also brings in siblings, your neighborhood. Gemini is very much associated with writing and short journeys and really short courses or early sort of educational types of things. So it can cover those areas too. On the 3rd of September, we have Mercury, which is in Libra, opposite this Jupiter retrograde in Aries. Now, we will have Mercury going retrograde shortly too. So I would say that this Mercury retrograde I felt was an important retrograde, and I'll continue to speak more about that as we go along into this video. So I thought this, for those folks that are having to pick a day, say, for negotiating and something really working out for them in their favor, good for negotiations, getting advice. Jupiter can represent someone like a teacher or an advisor. And it can also be a time when benefits could come your way, especially through things that are Libra related. And of course, that kind of boils down to laws, right? So for those folks that, and Jupiter to some extent also represents the law. So I think overall, this on the 3rd of September represents a potential time where you could meet up with somebody that could favorably help you negotiate through some kind of legal thing. And again, this doesn't have to be a negative thing, but it's going to be a back and forth because it's an opposition. An opposition isn't the most favorable aspect to have, but Jupiter on its own tends to be very favorable. So I saw this as a favorable time for folks that if you need to earmark a time in September for beneficial negotiations of some sort, 3rd of September would be a potentially good time. We have Venus also now in Virgo. We'll be conjuncting that degree point of the new moon in Virgo last month, and that's at 4 degrees. So for those folks, say some Virgos, either ascendants or sun signs or conglomeration of planets around 4 degrees of Virgo, this Venus coming in is just going to give a nice bump up in terms of benefits. Venus is viewed as the lesser benefic. But it could bring money in for you. It could bring a potential love. But this love will be a more practical, down to earth if it's a love type thing. But it can also just bring in some lovely sweetness with regards to love, values, and money. So see what you have potentially around this 4 degree mark of Virgo. All right, so we have the first lunation, which is a full moon. And this full moon is at 17 degrees of Pisces, 41 minutes. It puts the sun in the opposite sign, of course, at 17 degrees of Virgo on the 10th of September at 3 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We also have the sun, which will be trining Uranus, and that puts the moon sextiling Uranus. And I saw this as, just on that alone, positive change. No question of it. Positive change coming our way. And it could be as the result of, with the sun in Virgo, it could be as a result of us finally deciding, looking at the facts and the information we have, what makes sense here? What has some truth to it and validity and use? So on an individual basis, we may be going through an exercise like that. Now, we have an ongoing theme over the next couple months, certainly September and October, where we have in the background this Saturn, which is retrograde right now, squaring Uranus. And it's at 20 to 18 degrees respectively. And so again, we're looking at the old guard versus the new vision of our lives and how unexpected things come about to change things in terms of our individual destiny path and, of course, on the worldwide stage as well. Now, this can bring in new discoveries. That can certainly happen. I mean, Uranus certainly is all about scientific types of things. Uranus rules the skies above us. So that really speaks to, our universe. So new things could be coming in, not only in September, but certainly in early October when we have a more exact square of these two planets. Now, Mercury is retrograde at this time in Libra, and it will be opposite Jupiter retrograde. Well, to me, this was saying a lot about Jupiter used wrongly can exaggerate things. And in combination with Mercury, who can be a bit of a trickster, I saw this as lies, maybe even blatant lies coming out here at this full moon, where the law represented by here Libra, and then of course the retrograde of Mercury, going back to look carefully at some of the lies that may have been brought out and taking time to do that. Now, I'm going to stay on this for a minute because this Mercury starts in Libra, but it goes back into the sort of latter degrees of Virgo before it goes direct, around 24, 25 degrees of Virgo. And this says to me, this whole Mercury retrograde is really speaking to the fact of we're going to go back here and we're going to look real carefully and critically at these facts and then bring them back as Mercury goes retrograde and goes back into Libra, where the law stands up and says, this is what we've found. Now, this can apply to the world stage, but if you've got something around these degree points, Libra as well as Virgo, you could have something come up here too. And it could literally be the law, right, where you have to deal for some reason with the law. Individually, it doesn't have to be negative, but just pay attention to if you do have some degree points, say around 8 Libra, and then 24 to 26 of Virgo, because that's kind of the territory it will be covering for the Mercury retrograde. I think it's a very important Mercury retrograde, by the way. Nicely, this Mercury retrograde at this full moon, we're still on the full moon in Pisces, will be trining Mars in Gemini. And although this brings in a positive, favorable energy, I just got this intuitive hit because this whole Mercury is retrograde, that there's an activation here of maybe some deception going on. So that kind of works with the whole opposition of Mercury opposite Jupiter too. I felt this was maybe deception, again, probably on the world stage of some sort, certainly communications, right? We're talking Gemini here, any kind of messages of any sort, whether it's on your cell phone, through letters, through emails, even through speaking, could all be up here. Now, we have Neptune, which is retrograde at 24 degrees of Pisces. It'll be widely conjunct this moon and sun. And I really felt, I got this image of dissolving, right? And that's the literal thing I got, was dissolving. And we certainly know that Neptune can do that. Neptune can dissolve things. So bringing in this whole thing into a picture for folks regarding this full moon, I saw this whole Neptune thing dissolving all the things that were put forward. And Mercury going in, collecting the facts in Virgo and bringing them forward. So the whole act will be the dissolving of what's not true and going back and figuring out what are the true facts here. That's how I saw this full moon in Pisces, generally speaking, playing out. But remember that the full moon in Pisces is an immutable sign. So that means you're able to bend and change. It is ruled by Neptune and then also by an ancient ruler of Jupiter. But both these planets are retrograde, so they're not really up to their full power. They're more working in the background. And that's how I feel it goes back to this whole collecting of information regarding what kind of messages were put out. So the other thing that Neptune rules is actually the feet. And another image I got was people dancing, and it may be literally dancing for some folks, but it could also be tap dancing around things, trying to avoid the truth, right? That was another image I had. But on the positive side, certainly Jupiter as well as Neptune ruling this Pisces can represent imaginative creations. And with the sextile to Uranus, again, we may have some kind of scientific potential come up here. Maybe greater and bigger images from space will come in. But the other side of Pisces is you can have escapist fantasies. It highlights things like hospitals, charities, prisons, ashrams. It is also the sign of redemption, and it's a full moon. So for some folks, maybe even some Pisces here, they will feel a big release of some sort that's positive for them at this full moon. But as a dissolution, there's big chances here of spirituality, but confusion can also be brought in as well. But because I think this whole Neptune is dissolving things, that dissolving may actually clear a lot of things up for us, individually as well as collectively. Now, on the opposite side, where we have the Sun in Virgo, this is also a mutable sign. So there's lots of room here for negotiations, for changing our mind, that type of thing. But it's introspective, it's discreet and methodical, and it likes to be of service to others. It really likes to get in and analyze the facts and decide what's worth keeping and what isn't worth keeping. And it rules in terms of the body, that the digestive organs, and this then lends itself to that whole health aspect of Virgo too. Now, I talked about Mercury going retrograde. It does go retrograde that day at 8 degrees and 55 minutes of Libra. But it will go direct on the 2nd of October at 24 Virgo. And as I said, I think this is where the law goes back to collect the facts and brings them right back in October. All right. On the 17th of September, we have the Sun sextiling a retrograde Neptune. Now, it'll do this every year. It's just nice setup where you are given opportunities to really maybe in an introspective way reflect on truth, reflect on your spirituality, maybe even get involved in some aspects of spirituality, charity work, that could come in here. Anything of service could be up for some folks too. We have Venus at 14 degrees of Virgo, will be squaring Mars in Gemini. So this could just have us, I saw this as folks debating the facts. You know, I saw this back and forth. I say this, you say that. Remember, Gemini is two people, right? So that's what I see coming up also on the 17th of September. But nicely, we also have Venus trining the North Node, which of course is in Taurus. And so this gives us favorable energy to potentially get on, to get some benefits from aiming towards, you know, our destiny, basically, because the North Nodes represent our destiny, right? More our collective destiny. But certainly if you've got your own North Nodes, for instance, in Taurus, and you're having your nodal return, this Venus trining this can give you some money. It can bring love your way, but it can, I always like to look at it, especially connected with the North Node, that you really get a firm understanding of the value of yourself. On the 19th of September, we have that Sun now trining Pluto retrograde. And even though it's a retrograde, it's more introspective for sure if we've got a retrograde happening. But again, this is positive energy. And it's positive energy to transform, more so our internal psychological selves. Pluto rules Scorpio and the 8th house. And the 8th house, one of the things that it represents is our inner psychological selves. So this could bring kind of like a bright spark to ourselves and some energy that psychologically we feel more lifted, more positive. All right, so we're going to finish off this month with a new moon in Libra. It'll be at 2 Libra 48 on the 25th of September at 2:55 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And at this time, that Mercury retrograde is going to be in Virgo. It will widely conjunct the moon and the sun, even though it's in a different sign, because it's at the latter degrees of Virgo. The other thing that's happening is the Venus is opposition to Neptune, but trine Pluto still, and our Jupiter retrograde in Aries is opposite the moon and the sun. We've got Saturn square Uranus at 19, 18 degrees respectively. My feeling about this is, again, we're looking at the law, judges, diplomacy could be on the cards here as well in terms of the worldwide stage. But that whole Jupiter retrograde opposite the moon and the sun really said some individuals will be either overtly or covertly in their head saying, I'm above the law. And overtly, this may be a lot of boasting that goes on. But rest assured, once that Mercury retrograde goes forward in October, that long arm of the law, it's coming in. So I guess it's don't step outside of the law around this new moon. Just follow the law, I would say, is your best recourse here. Now, Libra is a cardinal sign, and it likes to lead. Libra is ruled by Venus. And so where is Venus right now? Venus is at 25 degrees of Virgo. So at this new moon, Venus is saying, I have to be practical. I have to use my critical faculties to figure out what facts are important here. I may even need to take care of, maybe some individuals, of your digestive system. Maybe some corrections for some individuals have to come in here too. Now what's interesting is that whole Mercury retrograde that I've spent some time on will be going direct at this Venus degree point at the new moon. So there's a tie-in with this new moon and that whole Mercury going direct next month in October, right? So it's on the 2nd of October that happens. It's not long after this new moon. So what do we focus on when we have a new moon in Libra? Well, first of all, I'd like to focus on Librans and say that Happy New Year. This is your new year, Libra. And certainly if you've got anything around, say, the 1 to 3 degree mark of Libra, say your ascendant or sun, I would say that this whole year could bring in a lot of newness for you. So we focus on balance when we talk about Libra, justice. Therefore, we're also focusing on laws, official legal papers. You're seeking harmony at this new moon. But it also represents partnerships. Why is that? It's because Libra is represented by the 7th house. And Libra, as I mentioned, is ruled by Venus. So partnerships of all sorts could come up at this time. I would say this could be business or marriage partnerships, but at this time, it's a new start to focus as a team, not as an individual. We're also implicated with politics, diplomacy, and of course charm when we bring Venus into the conversation here. But I would say because this is a new moon, there could be a really nice touch of sweetness for those that have these degrees somewhere in their own chart at a significant point. So that would be your ascendant, your sun, your moon, or a conglomeration of planets, right, to have a real effect. but it can also bring in potentially some money. And I mean, if we just look at the literal translation of Venus and then Libra, we could say that maybe some money that was owed to some individuals comes in here for you. But I'll just remind you that Venus represents money for sure. It represents our values, especially the value of ourself. It represents love. But when it's in Virgo, it's concerned with the facts, ma'am, just the facts, and is very practical. When we look at October, I've already mentioned that the Mercury will go retrograde in Virgo, but it does start our eclipse season again. And we will have a new moon eclipse in Scorpio, a full moon in Aries, and we'll have the exact square of Saturn as well as Uranus. Next, I'm going to be doing the Sun and or Ascendant signs. All right, Virgo. So on the 9th of September, we have a Venus that's going to be at 4 degrees of Virgo. And that will exactly conjunct that new moon that you had, Virgo, back in August. So if you've got anything, I would say between, say, 3 degrees up to 5 degrees of Virgo, this is going to add some very nice benefits for you. Venus is ruled or looked at as the lesser benefic, and it tends to bring in a nice sweetness. This could be something as simple as a deal is sweetened that maybe you took a new start with at the end of August, and now something very beneficial comes out of it. Could be money comes in for you too, for some Virgos. Could be a new love. Maybe you met somebody in August or did something in August regarding love or partnerships, and then Venus comes to conjunct it and makes it even sweeter. Like I said, some will actually have money coming in at this time too. Maybe part of that new beginning was you taking up a new job, and now you actually see the money, and it's actually more money than you actually anticipated. That's a nice benefit. It can also represent a female though too, right? So there may be, and this may be tied into love as well, if you've got something in that degree orb that I mentioned, that a female becomes very important for you at this time. That has something to do with a new start. So the full moon in Pisces is opposite your sign, Virgo. And so we've got Neptune up in Pisces, so Neptune's opposite too, right? So this is really speaking to your 7th house of partnerships. There's a big wrap up happening here for you, Virgo. And I would say there may have been a lot of kind of confusion, and that's putting it mildly, but it could have been outright deception happening in your life. This is the tie-up. Now, it would have had something to do with partnerships, marriage partnerships, business partnerships. It could even be clients for some Virgos, where you were maybe, blindsided with regards to something. Well, this full moon is going to bring everything to the surface, and you're going to be able to successfully deal with this. Why? First of all, it's an opposition, so you're going to have to be dealing with this, no question. But you've also got a Mercury retrograde going on. Hey, Virgo, you love connecting the dots as well as collecting the facts and deciding what's true and what isn't true, what's of use, what isn't of use. So this full moon is going to have you looking at the facts regarding a partnership and making a decision. I see this as closing a door. Something's going to end for you successfully. Just if you have any point of confusion, check it out. Don't let that go, because this could be high deception time for some Virgos with regards to partnerships, clients, business, marriage, anything like that. But this is a big wrap up for you too. I spoke about another sign about going through that big door that you've been desperate to get through and close. That's it here at the full moon around the 10th of September. And certainly if you've got a birthday around the 10th of September, this is going to be a final, very, I think, happy wrap up and door closing time that will make you feel good. It won't be a negative thing. You have Mars in the 10th house from October this year to January 2023. So the 10th house is the career house. It's also, long-term goals. So you could be doing a number of things. Some Virgos may be just reassessing their goals and their long-term plans. Maybe you're going to do that with your manager or your supervisor, that you go through this period of really carefully looking at what are my long-term goals here in my career. For others, it could have a couple things. Mars can bring in a lot of action and energy. And even in the retrograde in your 10th house, it could have you being very active in your career. But it can also have you having to go back on things in your career and maybe correct some stuff that needs to be corrected. But it does bring energy to your career. It can also bring a male into focus that might be important to you in your career as well. And depending, what you have in this 10th house, you could be activating other planets, for instance, that are important for you, that lend another little bit of storyline to whatever's going on in your career. But this is a long time for Mars to be staying in your 10th house. For others, it's just, I think, going to have some Virgos just saying, well, I need to look at all this stuff that I've been doing in all these years I've been in my career and start maybe literally reaching out to other people and experimenting with regards to what gives me energy, what makes me feel alive, right? And for some folks, you're going to come to the conclusion that this career I'm in is not making me come alive, and that you decide to make some changes in your career and your long-term goals. The new moon in Libra is going to be in your 2nd house. The 2nd house is the income that you earn. And of course, we're going to have a Mercury retrograde going on in your sign right now, right? It goes from Libra into Virgo, and then early in October, Mercury retrograde goes direct in your sign, Virgo. I see this straight off as you negotiating for better pay with the money that you make. 2nd house is the money that you make is the value you have yourself. For others, it might be that you have to deal with some kind of legal aspects with regards to either the money you make, values. It could have something to do with real estate or your possessions. Those may come up for some new start. But with the Mercury retrograde happening in your sign, it could have you having to come up with some facts and information. Hey, Virgo, you're not going to have any problem with that. You are the master of coming up with a critical eye, first of all, as well as discerning what's important in terms of the information that you're looking at. And this may all tie into the money that you're making. But there's a new start here for you with regards to the money that you make. Maybe some folks will be getting a new job or taking maybe a higher position in the job that you have. But you're going to have Venus also in Virgo at this time too. Yeah, so that's going to be awesome. And of course, we've spoken about this whole transit of Uranus conjunct the North nodes in Taurus. Well, Taurus is a fellow Earth sign like you, Virgo, and this is trining Virgo. So certainly if you've got something in Virgo around, say, your sun or your ascendant, is around that, let's just say 16 to 20 degrees of Virgo, you're having this awesome, once-in-a-lifetime positive energy being beamed down on you. For what? For changing your destiny path. Where you thought you would never be able to change something in your life, you're getting the energy from the universe saying, oh, yes, you can. just let the change happen. Roll with the punches. Because sometimes these things come from the outside, these surprises, and we think it's a bad thing. No, I would say the vast majority of things that happen for the best. And of course, we're going to have the sun going into Virgo. Of course, everyone's going to be having their birthdays, etc., etc. So happy birthday to some of those Virgos that are having their birthday happening, especially if you're having it around the 10th of September. Maybe a very momentous time of closing a door and a chapter in your life. Take care, Virgo. Okay, so that wraps up my video for September 2022. I hope you've enjoyed it. I always like listening to your comments and having some dialogue back and forth. If you would like to get your chart done, you know I would absolutely love to do that. Astrology is my favorite thing to do. I'm wishing everyone a great fall season. Please take care of yourself. I'm sending you lots of positive energy and lots of love. Bye for now.